Hello and welcome to the Volleycast. I'm your host, Joe Trinzi, here by myself. Quick little solo episode, kind of a Q&A, follow-up Q&A to our session this weekend. Before we get into that, just a little update on some of the stuff that we've got going on. We've had some great sessions lately. The most recent one this past Saturday was Danny Busman Kelly, head coach of Louisville. That was a really good session. That was my first really extended or really first conversation about volleyball with her. It's been one of the good things, I think, in the beginning of this, little project that I just kind of threw together and been figuring out as I go. It was, just like calling my bros and talking to them and, hey, people that I already really knew well. And I kind of almost knew what they were going to say a little bit. So it's been good as the weeks have gone by. I've been like, okay, hey, who can I really learn from, and who might say some things that I don't know what they're going to say when I ask them the question. So that's been it's been kind of exciting for me to just go and say like, hey, when I watch this team play, hey, I see 80-90% of the stuff looks right on with what I would be teaching. And then maybe there's some things that are a little bit different and I want to know why. I think everybody kind of see when we've been doing these workshops on Saturdays, and you can check them out, scoutvb.com. It's got the store there. We've been going sort of bottom up. Do a lot of gold medal squared clinics. I've been heavily involved in gold medal squared, been on the advisory staff for a few years now. The GMS Plus platform, if you go on gold medal squared, it's got awesome coaching resources. Like, I think that the coaching clinics that we do at gold medal squared, I really think they're the best of their kind. I think that they're awesome. We do these big 3-day clinics, and the teaching approach it's a curriculum that we go from there. It's sort of this, we start with the first principles. I mean, we start with the very first principles before even volleyball of like, here's how learning works. Here's how the body learns skills. And then we just go from there and sort of add on to different things and say, okay, here's how we build it out into systems of passing and systems of playing offense and systems of playing defense, et cetera. So it's really this sort of like top-down first principles approach. And I've been doing these workshops. I've been really going the exact opposite, kind of a bottom-up approach for a couple of reasons. One, not building them to like compete with gold medal squared. We already have these great gold medal squared coaching clinics, and there's other good coaching clinics out there too, but gold medal squared are the ones that I do, so those ones that I know the most about. So, hey, there's already that really good material out there, so you can kind of get into that. And then the other thing is, like, I think that there's some value in learning both ways, and especially with sort of the smaller time frame that an online or virtual workshop is like 2 hours. So we don't really have time necessarily to go first principles and kind of do all that. And I think that there's some value in, we kind of go the bottom up, looking at these specifics of what a individual team is doing and why they're doing it. And then we try to pull out the larger principles kind of from there. So I've been really enjoying sort of almost taking the opposite approach to learning and trying to go hyper specific and then connect them to the larger principles rather than the other way around. So it's been really kind of fun. The session with Danny was fantastic. I'll share a couple takeaways from that in a second, and then also a setting related question that I got from a listener. But before we do that, on the 13th, this weekend, a couple days, we got Lucas Slave, assistant coach of the USA Women's National Team and now head coach of NC State. He'll be in his first season in the fall. And Lucas coached professional international level men's volleyball, international level women's volleyball, and now he's going to the NCAA women. So we're talking about block and defense, but kind of with this theme of transitioning between levels, what transfers and what might need to change. So I think that's a topic that coaches have to deal with a lot in your coaching journey. If you're anything like me and you've coached club and then you're coaching in college, or you're coaching mid-major college, or you're coaching maybe a Division II and then you go to Division I, or vice versa. Maybe you're a Division I assistant and then you go to be a Division II head coach or something like that, or transferring between the men's and the women's game. We've talked about that a little before on here. Dave and I have had kind of a couple discussions because we've been on both sides of that. I think there's a lot to be learned and understood when you think about teaching players, I say of different levels, and that applies. Well, there's a lot of different things. It could be just an experience level. It could be like a skill level could be an athleticism. His size and physicality is different between levels. It can be the amount of coaching resources that you have. You know, if you're a JUCO coach, you have a player for 1 or 2 years. And, you know, whether it's Division I, you're expected to have the player for 4 or 5 years, assuming they don't transfer and you treat them right and all that. But, and I think maybe the teaching process might be a little bit different than that, you know, and vice versa throughout all the levels, kind of depending on all these different factors. So I think it's really worth understanding that. So we're going to kind of talk to Luke about blocking defense and within the context of changing between some of these different levels as kind of like a subtext there. So I think that you'll enjoy that. That's this Saturday the 13th. The next weekend, got Dave Height, a guy I know well. He's an awesome guy. He's associate head coach at BYU Women's. And that's going to be on June 20th. And he's talking about middle attacking. Just we're going deep on middle attacking. BYU is a program that they've used their middles in a lot of different ways. And like a lot of different type of sets. You know, some teams, I think you kind of see them like, hey, this is how we run the middle. Maybe, hey, we always run a 4-step quick. It's always relative to the center. Okay, that's what we do. Boom. And we just get good at that. Nothing wrong with that. The thing I like about BYU is they've set anywhere from like high 2 balls to like, you know, fast 4-step quicks in the middle. They've set tight to the center. They've set gaps. They've set fixed point. They've set floating point. They run some different slides. They have their middles go off and hit behind the center off 2 feet, like a right side here. You know, they use a whole bunch of different stuff. And they've had like, I mean, just a string of All-American middles at BYU and use them in some different ways. Like really good players, but really different players. So I'm really kind of fired up to hear Dave talk about like, hey, here's this player and here's what we used. Here's why we used that offensive concept with her. And then the next year, here's why we use a different concept with this different player based on their strengths and weaknesses. So I think people will like that a lot. And then June 26th, that's going to be a Friday session. June 26th. Great. Kirsten Bernthal Booth of Creighton, head coach of Creighton. A really, I think, like highly requested clinician. Somebody that just is always people want to learn from because she's taken a program at Creighton that was pretty bad, I think, when she got there. And they're one of the, just a string of top 25 every year now, it seems like, and one of the best programs in the country. So it's sort of how do you go from there? That's like really pretty cool. And we're talking about defense and in particular, like serving. So serving and defense and how those two concepts are related, how serving can set up your defense, how it can also operate on its own. And then of course, you have the block and defense component. You know, Creighton is really one of the best, serve block defense teams in the country. So we're going to look at what they're doing and kind of figure that out. And the next weekend, that's going to be the 4th of July weekend. You'll have me. I'm going to do, I think what I'll do, it's 4th of July. So a lot of people are doing other stuff, but I think some other people, of course, you're like me. You just want to talk volleyball every weekend. So what I'm going to do is I think that's going to be anybody who's done a session already. And I probably won't do it on the 4th. I'll probably either do it on Friday the 3rd or Sunday the 5th. So let me know about that. But anybody who's already participated in one of our workshops, this sort of be open to you for free. And we'll kind of I'm going to call it like an intermediate stat and analysis session. So maybe not as super kind of in the weeds as we got with sessions with Jeff Liu and Nate Go at, the USA technical coordinators. We did a couple of those sessions to be a little more intermediate and a little bit more applied from, how coaches can make some of this action blood practice. We'll talk about, I'll just kind of share what I'm doing and how I use some of the stats and information to help me make better decisions and coach more effectively. So that will be kind of like a freebie for anybody who's already participated. I think they like that. And, Danny said it in sessions up in the store now. I think if you haven't kind of seen one of these sessions, I think we're upgrading them. We have the recording, obviously, and all the Q&A and all the responses that goes along with that. And now the fantastic Peter Wong, he is helping me put notes together. Basically, we turn each session. We also kind of an accompanying like little mini ebook, a little 10-page mini ebook with notes. And it can function for you as like a reference. So it's got the timestamps on there so you can link up to the video. But then also, we pull out some still frames and some images and stuff like that. It's almost like a little mini reference book for you after you watch the video to kind of keep up with the content and refer back to it and stuff like that. So people have been liking that. And I think you'll like it. And final good news. I don't mean this to all. I hope this all doesn't feel like advertising. I hope that it feels a little bit just kind of cluing you in what we're doing and how I'm learning about doing sessions like this and kind of all this stuff. And I think y'all be excited. I got a text from Dave, and Dave Hunt told me, said, Marv is in for doing something for free. So we've been talking about getting the great Marv Dunphy for our coaches workshop. So that's awesome. He said, Marv's in for doing something for free. So yeah, we'll have a free session with Marv. And I think it kind of be kind of the same deal, but like way better than the sort of session that I'm going to do over 4th of July. So anybody who participates in a coach's workshop, I'm sure a lot of coaches, so we won't limit it to 20. Normally we'll limit these to 20. But I think with Marv, maybe we'll just kind of open it up to everybody. And he's gracious enough to kind of drop some knowledge, and probably won't be a theme to that one. That'll sort of just be an open Q&A, because I think so many people have questions for somebody like Marv, who's just won national championships in like 4 different decades and Olympic gold medals and all that. And that will be the last one we'll do this summer. That's kind of my hope, assuming it works out kind of on the week that Marv can do it. Looking at like July 25th or August 1st, that sort of last weekend. It'll be kind of the last one that we'll do, because then our coaching guest hosts will be getting into their preseason. They'll be like super busy. So no more time for doing these on Saturday, and we'll kind of just wrap that up for the summer. And yeah, I think that would just be an awesome way of kind of a Q&A with Marv. So keep an eye posted for some of that stuff, on Twitter or on Instagram at Volleycast. Yeah, or just shoot me an email. It's joe.trinzi@gmail.com. Let me know what you're thinking and what you want to hear. Just want to keep just connecting coaches and sharing this stuff. Okay. So a couple things that I want to talk about. One of my takeaways that I really enjoyed from talking to Danny Buss from Kelly. And it was interesting. I always love these things where coaches. So I'll back up for a second. Andrew Strick talked about this on one of our early episodes with Dave. We're talking about motor learning and talking about, beginners and high level athletes and different things like that. And what's explicitly, what you learn explicitly and what you learn implicitly just kind of by doing it. And one of the things that we see with high level athletes is, I don't want to say false attribution, but they start to automatize or habitualize certain things about when they perform their skills. They just, when they pass, they don't have to think about some of the ways that they bend their knees or get behind the ball, or, just whatever they do, certain things that they just don't really have to think about anymore. So a lot of times we say, hey, what are the most important things with you with passing? They may not necessarily say the most important things, because some of the things that are most important, they do habitually. So what's most important to them is sort of like, is maybe not the first 80% to getting good at passing that like maybe a beginner would have to focus on more. They're more focused on like the last 5% because that's what they need. That's what they haven't automatized it. And I see that with coaches. So sometimes like really good coaches, they will like say something and to them it's almost like not too significant because it's just kind of what they do. It's sort of how they operate. Maybe it's just how they are as people, But then sometimes I catch it, I'm like, oh yeah, okay, that's part of why you're successful. And, I was going back talking with Danny on email a little bit after the session. I was just saying, one thing that I noticed, and I'm going to kind of put it in this framework. She didn't say it in this framework, but I'll say it. The way that I just comes through in all the ways that Danny talks about interacting with her setters and how she coaches her setters and all this is, I'm going to label it high support, high challenge. And I'm saying in that term because, I have a young daughter. She's 10 months old. And so, of course, I'm a nerd and I feel like I need to like read references and scientific studies and all this. So, okay, I'm like trying to read all the resources I can about being a better parent. A lot of this stuff doesn't come to me naturally and all that. So, okay, I'm trying to learn and read. And one of the things in the parenting literature is like this 2x2 matrix of challenge and support. So you could be like high or low in either area. So you could be low or high support combined with low or high challenge. So it's like kind of 4 concepts. And it just like shines through for me, for Danny, like how she coaches the setters is high support, high challenge. And, kind of back up. And what this sort of means is, so imagine like low support, low challenge. This is like disinterested. It's sort of like the worst that you can be probably. If we relate it to coaching, it's like you're kind of disinterested. You don't really care. You don't really do much. This is like kind of worse than the players just playing for themselves because they kind of have to listen to you, but you don't really do much. You don't challenge them. You don't really set any expectations and you don't really give them much in the way of tools. So that's kind of crappy. don't think hopefully none of us are in that category. And then we have this idea of like high support, low challenge. This is like the sort of quote unquote, like a spoiled brat or kind of coddled child. So it's, the challenges are pretty low in front of them. The play, for the player, okay, you don't demand much of the players. And then, but you really support them. It's like, oh, you're always there, pat on the back, and you're saying really nice things, and you explain everything when they make a mistake. Oh, let me explain it to you, and all this. So you're kind of supporting your players, but the challenge level is really low. So we see like definitely a low level of resilience there from those players. They don't know how to overcome challenges because they are not challenged on a regular basis, and kind of used to the coach doing everything for them. So we don't, that's kind of like an extreme example of like really high support with really low challenge. And then you have like high challenge, low support. So this is sort of, I don't know, the drill sergeant who demands, but then you figure it out, kind of stuff like that. And I think even that there's ways of saying you figure it out that are supportive, because you've engineered the environment that they can overcome that challenge. Even if you just tell them, hey, you figure it out, you kind of know they could figure it out if they really work at it. So just saying you figure it out isn't necessarily low support, but low support is like, hey, we got to get a kill out there. Pass the ball. That kind of stuff is sort of like low support, high challenge. It might be high challenge depending on how much you're asking them. That's sort of like the low support, high challenge. It's like, you have to do this. You have to be good. You have to do this. You have to be good. But then you don't really give them the tools. So that can work with players that are coming in with the right motivation and with a challenge level is suited to them. So where we see that do well with players that are self-motivated and have the skill level to meet those challenges or to come close to meeting them challenges. And we see that not work well with players that, come in with less skill than is required to meet the challenges because they don't have the support, the learning support to learn how to meet them. Then we have this idea of high support, high challenge. This is where I think is a parenting model that I'd like to strive to. This is what I see a lot of the best coaches. They just challenge their athletes relentlessly. It was kind of funny. It's fun to hear Danny talking about her setters, and it's like, basically somebody said, hey, do you design the offensive capabilities around like the skills of your hitters or skills of your setters? She's like, well, it's got to be around the skills of the hitters, and kind of like it's the setter's job. They need to learn how to set those balls. And you could just kind of tell that attitude. So that's like a high challenge attitude. It's like, hey, setters, you're not allowed to be the ones limiting the offense. You have to learn how to set what the hitters need, and you have to do it right. So that's the high challenge. And then the high support is, you can see in all these other actions is like, okay, we need to have these video sessions together and need to teach them how to do this. And we need to get in practice early and do these extra footwork patterns. And I got to teach them how to make this set and this hand work. And we got to study these tactics and got to have these film reviews. And okay, I'm talking to my setter right now, and she's sending me these matches and explaining to me things in her words. So there's all these like high support cues too. So I just thought that was just a cool. It's one of those things where the principle, but then you just see a different application, not even different application of it, but just like you just see it done again in a good way. Just like you can't watch, I don't know, too many people, every high level passer kind of does the same thing, but just in their own way with their own body type and their own, and all that. And just, you see the high level coaches, I think they all have this high support, high challenge. So I love seeing that. It made me think about that. And I guess probably most people who deal with Annie Bossman-Kelly probably have seen that. That's why she's been a successful coach, and I think will continue to be a successful coach. So it was great for just me to see just another coaching role model for myself there. I learned that a lot. And now, okay, kind of following up another setter question. Got an email from Steve Field, and he was just talking about basically he was listening to the Chris Thomas setting video. He bought the recording of that and was listening to it. He said, I heard Chris talk about a left, right, left forward pattern. I also heard Bren Joseph talk about that a little bit. He said, I've always taught to use a left, right, or a right, left, right forward pattern. Is there just a reason for why you'd want to use a left, right, left? What are the reasons for that? And basically, here's kind of the deal is I think all of these coaches, they all prefer to kind of have this left, right, or right, left, right, depending on how you want to say it. They're all going to kind of prefer this right, left, right move and have that be the go-to. whether you're looking to finish off 2 feet or off one. I think they're all going to prefer to finish that way. But in my experience, I think you can maybe think of two different ways. Is number one, I'm really concerned about the players taking a good footwork pattern to make the finish and the release with the hands easier. So they really got to get the right footwork, which for them is going to be right, left, right. And then the second way to think about it is like, I'd like to take the good footwork, but I just think that there's going to be so much chaos. Sometimes the setters are going to be in weird positions, and they need to learn to make the set from that weirder or unconventional body position. So an example of that is just going to be, and I'll pull up some video clips so people who are watching on YouTube can watch this, is as a setter moves backward in the zone 2, the basic thing is like, how hard do you work to sort of like try to get back onto your right foot, get off your right foot, even when you're going backwards, which kind of almost is like you have to take an extra step, or you have to, just the footwork is a little more challenging, versus, okay, as the pass is taking me backwards, I'm okay just planting back off my left foot and then adjusting my body and my finish to kind of compensate for the less than ideal footwork. And it was interesting, and kind of here's why I like hearing the different applications of this is, we heard, Danny in the most recent session basically say, we want to finish off the right foot every time. And if there isn't any examples of going back, off the left, it's like that's sort of just an emergency move. We don't really train it very much, only in the same way that we train some of the other like very emergency moves, maybe like pulling a ball out of the net or something like that. Got to train them sometimes. But for us, going back off the left is sort of purely an emergency move. And we want to get off the right foot every single time. And, Steve noted that he heard Chris Thomas say, I don't really mind them going off the left foot. He's preferring to go off the right. I don't really mind them going off the left foot because for me, it's all starting with the hands and the release. And even in the less than ideal position, we'll figure out how to still get the release and get the body position from that area and still have a good release, even from a more challenging sort of footwork and body position. So I think that's sort of just two ways of approaching it. And, that was one of the questions that we asked. An attendee asked Danny, hey, if you're teaching a setter, like, what's more important? Do you start with the feet or do you start with the hands? And she was sort of saying like, hey, but you got to have both. But maybe leaning a little more towards getting your footwork first. And that was interesting. And I think what we've heard from Chris is like, he likes to start, almost like hands first. And that's the most important to him. So I think like it's sort of working towards the same principles, but maybe from slightly different ends in terms of like the actual hands-on teaching. So Steve, hope that, clears some things up for you. And I think it's kind of up to you to decide where you want to fall on that. I think your right, left, right is always going to be your dominant pattern on setting. But you sort of decide, okay, are we going to work really hard to get that same footwork no matter where the pass takes us? Or am I going to say, I think on some of these passes, we might just have to kind of take this sort of like quote unquote emergency move of like planting back off our left foot and maybe we want to invest more time in it and learning to be more comfortable off that because maybe the ball's going to get us there anyway. So that's sort of up to you. I think for me personally, I don't mind going off the left foot occasionally. I just don't want it to be a crutch. And to me, it does depend a little bit on how powerful the setter is. Because setters that are really powerful, I think they're a little more okay going back off the left foot. But a lot of setters aren't. So that's something to think about, how physical your setters are. So we'll see some clips of Illinois, and they had a setter, Jordan Poulter, who was incredibly physical. So she could go back off the left and still have more than enough power to throw it all the way wherever she needed to. And maybe that's something that you want to decide. Do your players have the physicality to still make those sets? Or will they ever develop the physicality if they're never asked to throw the ball all around the court? So I don't know. Maybe there's chicken and the egg thing there. So that's that. And so we'll roll some clips there. We'll roll some clips now. For anybody who's watching on the YouTube, and if you're just listening to the podcast app, these clips probably aren't going to be all that interesting to you. So it's probably a sign out here, and I'll probably talk to you next week. And otherwise, if you're on the YouTube, we'll roll some video clips. Here we go. So give me a second to pull those up. So we'll share, this is some clips on Illinois, and we'll see in some cases where she's kind of going back off her left and then still finishing, in some cases where she's able to get both feet and finish left, right. So we'll just see a little bit of a mix here. So there's kind of going back off the left and just finishing to where the hitter needed to be. So here would be an example of left, right, left footwork there. And still having a good finish to your target. Left, right, left. Left, right, left. So there's just a couple examples, and I think I prefer to finish right, left, right, but just a question of, how much on those balls where the setter is having to move backwards a little bit. Do you want to work to get your right, left, right footwork, or how much do you want to just accept the back off the left and then just get the handwork going for that? And just kind of follow up, Steve also asked about this cue of power off the ground. Use the ground when you set, or power off the ground. What a lot of the times a good test for that would be, this is a cue that a lot of setters like, hey, use the ground, set from the ground up, power off the ground, power from the ground. And kind of two things to think about this. One, if you want to have power setting, like with your wrists and hands and arms, it's got to need something to push against, right? Every reaction is equal and opposite reaction. So if your like core and lower body is super like weak and crumbly, it's hard to have a powerful finish because it's like just little jelly in the middle. So it's like you want to have that power, and you want that power to be rooted off the ground. So whether your feet are on the ground or whether you're jumping up from the ground, like when that power is like pushing through the ground, going up to the ball, you're going to have a lot more power than, for example, a setter who sort of jump sets and then sort of takes the ball and sets, as opposed to thinking about your set starting from the moment you start pushing off the ground, pushing up to the ball and setting through the ball. Think about like a good shooter in basketball. They don't just like jump up in the air and then shoot. The jump shot, it's all kind of, it's linked up together. And sometimes a good test for this when you see your setter jump set is if their set is going straight up and down, their jump is going more straight up and down rather than flying forward and backwards. You can still have good power as you're kind of drifting one way or the other. It just requires like more core strength and more upper body strength. So if when your jump setting is more straight up and down, that's a good indication you have more power, and then it just gives you a little extra power that you might need in your set or your release. So, all right, hope that helped, and see you next week.